All right, you mentioned that once you've been around for so many years, it's more about being reelected or being part of the process than doing the job that you're sent up there to do.
That's an opinion of mine. It's I think an unfortunate consequence.
It goes with the territory.
It goes with the territory. You get there, you like it, you feel it's work like I've never done before. It's such an honor and a privilege to be able to do it. But yet, when my time comes to not do it, then I call it a disease, actually, and I'll have to go into recovery and recover from the disease and have a life. But yes, it appears to me that there's a tendency to put more effort into staying there than doing the job.
Well, over the years, the state legislature and the governor have commissioned study after study after study that says our tax code is antiquated, that we're more of a service industry now, and we're giving away more money in tax breaks than we're taking in. But over the years, and it may be because of that, well, if I change the tax code, I offend somebody, I may not get reelected. In the discussions in your caucuses, is there talk ever of tax reform? Nobody wants to raise taxes, but at some point you can only cut for so long. Is there ever talk about reforming the tax code in the state in a Democratic caucus? Or are you allowed to talk about what you talk?
Well, no, yes, there is. To answer your question, is there ever talk about it? Not much. Most of the talk about tax reform is done in the media. And to Representative Kay's bill about term limits, perhaps, but it is out of political fear that it hasn't happened. I mean, everybody's afraid they're going to, in 2014 I voted to raise the floor of the gas tax so that the road fund would have sufficient revenue, and I think there was about 10,000 phone calls went out from the Republican Party asking people not to vote for me because I raised their tax. And I heard a lot about that, so I'm well aware that nobody wants their taxes raised. So to your point about term limits, it's possible that if we knew we only had a limited number of terms, that might be more likely to happen. I can tell you there's very little talk about it this year.
All right, about a year ago in the session, the road fund was in trouble. Gas prices were coming down, everybody's happy. Money coming in to the road fund was dropping, causing problems, causing budgetary problems, not only at the state level, but at the local level. And to the credit of the legislature, you all took action to reduce the amount that the tax could go down at one time. But now we're reading there's still some problems in the road fund. Has not enough time gone by? Or talk about that for a minute.
And of course, the road fund is dependent upon the price of gasoline. Should gasoline start going back up, well, the road fund will get a little healthier. Personally, I don't want the price of gasoline to go back up. I know investors will be tickled if that happens, but I think it's so valuable for these people who go to work every day and fill their gas tank up and spend about half what they were 3 years ago. That's too valuable for us to give up. Now, what was your question?
All right. So, what do we do to make the road fund whole so that it doesn't continue to suffer?
Yeah. We raised the floor, which there's a little. Probably don't have time to get into how the gas tax is calculated. I'm afraid I'm not smart enough to make all your viewers understand.
We need to use this whiteboard back here and start doing X plus Y divided by Z.
Like Sheldon.
Yeah.
On Big Bang Theory. Yeah. He's so cute. But anyway, what we did last year reduced the fall. In other words, we're only going to lose $127 million in the road fund this year. It was going to be well over $200 million.
Okay. So,
translated, I think Marion County roads will actually feel about a $200,000 reduction. And each county, that gas tax money comes back to the county, or around half of it, 40 to 50% comes back to the county for fixing potholes, guardrails, bridges, Like out at Bradfordville, the river has washed the road away. I went through there last night and sat there for 20 minutes while they had humongous equipment trying to fix that so people can travel it. So the road fund is, bottom line is you got, somebody has to spend money to keep the roads the way the users want them, and it takes a lot of money. And so I try to balance my view towards respecting the taxes people pay, but yet I also want, because the gas company, Exxon Mobil, they're not going to fix the roads. It's up to the government to do that.
Well, as an observer, and I understand when the Bluegrass Parkway is built, that we put a toll on. When the road is paid for, the tolls come off. In retrospect, tolls, no matter what the cost, on some of our major thoroughfares like the Bluegrass or the Western Kentucky and the Natcher and the Cumberland and the Pennyroyal, would that have been a source of income in hindsight?
Sure.
That nobody would have liked to have paid.
It would have been a source of income, but the promise was made when those were built that they would come off, and you don't. Worst thing we can do as elected officials and government representatives go back on our promise. There's a big debate now, as you probably know, about tolls. There's a much needed bridge, or much needed depending on who you ask, in northern Kentucky, and a proposal has been made to replace the bridge, but it involves tolls. And there's a big argument now about whether we should toll. And then of course the bridge in Louisville will be tolled. We saw a presentation, and they're actually moving along faster than they thought on the I-65 bridge.
Okay. Action taken today, the 15th of January, as we're recording this, felony expungement off of people's records. I guess I only saw that it had passed. You were probably driving home when I saw that it had passed. Can you explain what the House did today?
Yeah, we actually passed two bills today, and that was one of them, House Bill 40, sponsored by Representative Darrell Owens and co-sponsored by many. I was a co-sponsor to that. What it does basically is people who are convicted, see right now you can have a misdemeanor expunged. That's already in the law. But what this bill does is allow, there's no such thing probably as a minor felony, but a Class D felony, which does not involve violence or sexual act or children, involving children, porn abuses, and that. It doesn't apply to that. Only the things like, in Marion County's case, some people who got caught when they were young growing some dope and got charged with a felony. It allows, after a 5-year period, if you've done everything, you've met your probation requirements and done everything you are supposed to do, it allows you to petition a court, and then a judge is allowed to expunge that conviction.
Okay, so it won't automatically come off.
It's not automatically. You're allowed, but before you couldn't. No matter what you did, you had to have a pardon
from the governor.
And those are few and far between. So it's been talked about. I believe this was about this. They said the 7th year, and the House has passed it every year, and it's always got hung up in the Senate, and it still has to go to the Senate. It's by no means is it law, but the difference this year is the governor is supporting it, and Chamber of Commerce is supporting this bill because they need workers.
All right, so the bill that came out, there's still. Once I went to prison, I served my time. Maybe I'm on probation for 5 years once I get out. Are you saying that once I have served my time, served my 5 years, there's an additional 5 years or tacked on, or when?
No, 5 years after you've completed your probation.
Okay, so
that's the way I understood it.
But if I served time and then when I got out, I was on.
And you were on probation and completed your probation.
Then 5 more years.
Then 5 more years from
Let me ask you, where is it that when I guess as an observer, once I've served my time, what's the next 5 years to make sure I don't go back again? Or why wouldn't it happen automatically?
I can tell you in the past, the bill has passed the House, and one of the problems that the Senate has had with it is they wanted it to be a longer period of time. So I think and I haven't talked to the sponsor of the bill. I did vote for it this morning, but I haven't talked to the sponsor of the bill about this. I think the reason he put the 5 years in was to increase the probability that it would pass in the Senate.
In past years, he wouldn't even compromise on that, I think, would he? Or he was pretty adamant?
In the end last year, I'd have to look, but in the end last year, I think he did compromise. But, you know, I was at the press conference that announced the filing of the bill last week, and I was with Governor Bevin, and Governor Bevin commented during the press conference that he didn't know why we had to wait 5 years.
Well, I mean, it's almost you did the crime, you did the time,
Yep.
but then we want you to wait 5 more years. But I guess if that's what it takes, people will still be better off. Because I know I've spoken with people. You know, Dennis, I've got this here. I can't get a job, and they almost say, "But I don't know how to go about cleaning my record of something that happened 25 years ago."
Yeah.
So this way, I guess it at least becomes more to a local level.
If this bill becomes law, it'll be, well, possible. I mean, before it wasn't really possible. I mean, if a governor came in who didn't like pardons, you could forget it. I think Governor Beshear pardoned about 200. Governor Fletcher pardoned about 100 in his half the time that Governor Beshear was there. So, but it's just so, and we heard members speak on the floor about this morning, but I knew all that. You know, I know children, 17, 18-year-olds. Let me give you an example of a case I know. An 18-year-old was with a friend, went into Walmart. The friend shoplifted something, came out, they accosted her friend. To defend her friend, she slapped the person, the law enforcement. Got charged with felony assault, went to court. Prosecutor said, didn't go to court, had the discussion with the county attorney, said, if you plead guilty to this felony, you'd go away. Thinking she was doing the right thing, parents, you know, couldn't be involved. She had a felony that she had to put on every job application that she filled out for the rest of her life, and that's wrong. And we have people in Marion County who did, frankly, stupid things when they were young. You know, get in a dope crop and get a conviction, and you know, when they're 65, should they, and they've done everything else right in their life, and they can't take their grandchildren hunting because they're not allowed to have a gun. I mean, that's you know, we got to be more compassionate than that, I think. So I don't know where. I hope the bill becomes law this year, but it's a good bill.
In closing, what else can we look forward to? I mean, we know pension reform is going to be out there. Anything in particular on the radar?
Oh yeah.
Before we get you to come back and talk about stuff.
You know what? I love it when you ask me to come because I've had that 6 years now that it takes to learn it, and I'm always happy to talk about it.
Well, that's why I throw a few more hard balls at you rather than the underhand pitches that you never threw me when I was batting against you.
I expect it. It's like politicians who only talk to their friends. I mean, Dennis, I expect the hard questions. If I can't answer them, then people should judge me on that, I think. So, but no, the big thing this year is the budget. And I think on January 26th, which is when the governor gives his budget address and lays out what he plans to do with the little over $20 billion that the state takes in for 2 years, I think that'll signal the beginning of one. You know, we all heard what the governor said during his campaign, and some people were a little alarmed by that. When it comes down to doing the budget and spending the money, we'll see where his priorities are and if they're consistent. And then after he gives us that, the House will study it, analyze it, go over it, try to read what our constituents want, craft their version of the budget. Then after that, it goes to the Senate. They'll do the same thing, craft their version, and then it goes back to the governor for final approval and possible vetoes. And so all of that process, there's just an untold amount of work that goes into that over in the annex, in the hallways, and in the committee rooms.
Late at night.
Used
to be the smoke-filled rooms with all the cigars and cigarettes.
Smoke. Yeah, there's no smoke and no alcohol there. I can testify to that because they tell me there was in the old days. But it's a fascinating process. It's government at work, and I'm just so blessed to be a part of it. It's awesome. It's a wonderful feeling to be involved in something that I feel is
All right.
good. So.
You mentioned something. I guess I was getting ready to end this, but the governor is inaugurated December 8th, thereabouts. Has 6 weeks to put together an administration, come up with a budget, which is a tight time frame, to get all that done. Not that it would help in that situation, but I understand there's also legislation being filed. I guess they say years ago members of the legislature didn't want to give up a seat to run for another seat. In other words, you couldn't have run for governor without giving up your seat because you couldn't run for 2 offices. So our statewide races are run basically in an off year where there are no other elections being held. I understand there's legislation being discussed or filed to bring our state offices into the same year as a presidential election or some other type of election. Does that have any chance of being passing?
I haven't. I'm aware of that. I haven't fully analyzed it or read the entire bill. I do know there's a difference of opinion in leadership in the Senate and leadership in the House. Usually, if the top guys in the Senate and the top guys in the House don't agree, the chances are pretty slim.
Okay.
So I would rate it's not on life support. It's still alive, but I would rate it less than 50-50 chance of passing this time.
We hope to have you back in a few weeks. Kind of get an update.
I'm honored.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I mean, as you said, I can read Twitter feeds, I can read news stories, I can hear radio, but sometimes you need to get it from somebody that you trust, someone that but as you said, it's your opportunity to speak to your constituents, and many of whom may not understand or get all of this information.
In spite of the fact that I'm not good at it, I'll come on anytime you want because it's an obligation I have to the people who sent me up.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you again in a few weeks.
Thank you, Dennis.
Okay.
Appreciate
For
it.
Channel 6 Community Focus, I'm Dennis George.